Here to unpack this and more is Epoch Times reporter Janice Heisel. Janice, it's good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us more about these pro-Trump Muslim leaders in Michigan. What are they saying? What's the significance of their endorsement?
Well, it's making quite a bit of news. It has been for a few weeks now. We did have a mayor in the outskirts of Detroit come out a few weeks ago and say that he was supporting the former president. And it's a little bit unusual and unexpected because of the fact that the former president had policies in place that some Muslims didn't really care for. But the bottom line is, for the Trump campaign, they're saying that Muslims want peace in the Middle East just as much as anybody else, and Trump, will push for that.
Now, there's a movement among Muslim voters to not vote for Harris. This has led many political strategists to believe that Trump actually has a chance to win them over. What can you tell us about this?
Well, I'm hearing that there is this movement called Drive for 75, which means that they're trying to come up with 75% of Muslim voters to go against Harris. Even if they don't go for Trump, maybe they'll go for Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, for example, because they don't agree with what her policies have been while she's been in office.
Yeah, it's so interesting. This seems like quite the shakeup here. People going away, these Muslim voters going away from Harris to Trump. Now, he's holding a rally at New York City's Madison Square Garden tomorrow. Also quite the shakeup. New York City is not exactly a Republican stronghold. You'll be attending that one. Who's going to be in attendance and what can we expect?
Well, the list of the speakers and special guests is really getting a lot of attention because of the fact that Elon Musk is such a huge person in our society for his business, for his rockets, for Twitter/X, all of these things. Tucker Carlson, a very famous media personality. Then we'll of course have J.D. Vance, who is Trump's running mate, members of the Trump family, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. So all of those people, plus some CEOs, and there's also going to be some singers, performers, artists. So there's kind of a potpourri of things for people to kind of just enjoy that day if that's what they want to do with their time on that day.
Yeah, and just with 9 days before the election, showing up here in New York, making this statement with a big, bold rally. It's interesting. Now, he was in the South Bronx just this summer, just in New York City also. Is a similar turnout expected?
From what I've seen from the Trump team, they're saying that normally Madison Square Garden would hold maybe 20,000 people, but it does look like they're setting it up for about 25,000. Now, there's actually a little bit of an interesting thing going on where some people are trying to gobble up some of these seats and make the arena a little less full and, not show up. So, but the Trump team says that they're coming up with some strategies to avoid having that happen.
Now, I guess the elephant in the room here is that, of course, like I mentioned, this is not a Republican stronghold in New York City. What is his strategy behind rallying in the blue states of New York?
Well, there is some strategy, but I think there's also some emotion. The strategy is that he wants to shore up his votes in the popular vote. So maybe if he were to win, then there would be less argument. Oh, it's only electoral college victory. The other thing would be that there are important down ballot races for different, Senate races, for, House of Representatives. And if he does win the presidency, he's going to need some help getting his agenda accomplished. And that's why he wants to get those votes up. The emotional part, though, he is a native New Yorker at heart.
Sure, yeah, I guess you can never really avoid that. Now, Trump said he's going to win New York. It seems almost unbelievable. Republicans haven't won New York State since the 1980s with Ronald Reagan. Is there any evidence that could back up his claim that they can make this a possibility?
Well, some people do think it is a pie-in-the-sky aspiration,
Sure.
maybe an emotional response on the part of the former president. However, some of the argument I'm hearing against that is that there are a lot of people who don't want to admit to pollsters, for example, that they do support him here in New York because, it hasn't been quite a popular thing since he did switch to the Republican Party.
Now, the former president appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast yesterday, as we talked about earlier. Tell us about the reaction to this. How many views is it up to now?
Gosh, well, it's just been all over everyone's social media. And I can say, I believe it was like 19 million views on YouTube alone. And that doesn't even count the many other platforms that are out there. And as to be expected, the people who don't like Trump have found ways to kind of criticize it. But those who love him are coming out and saying how great it was. But I read some really interesting comments in the middle where some people are saying, my mother-in-law was on the fence about Trump, but this moved her more toward voting for him because she now feels that he's more human and not the caricature that some media outlets have portrayed him to be.
Yeah, I did listen to a good part of it. It was pretty interesting. I mean, he begins by asking Trump about, what was it like in like a human experience type of way to go from not being the president, not even being a politician, to being the president, and kind of, it's like you get to hear this man's story about, what that is actually like. Imagine that.
I don't think we get to hear that very often from people who have been in the presidency. So I do think that there were a lot of people who were fascinated and really drawn in by those sorts of stories that Joe Rogan was able to elicit from the former president.
All right, Janice Heisel, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on, this is the first year Michigan is offering